All right, we are live, September 20th, 2025. I want to pick up where we left off. So, a couple nights ago, I tweeted a response to Eric Dowdery, who said, a resolution was filed to designate October 14th, 2025 as National Remembrance Day for Charlie Kirk. So I responded with, I guess it can also be George Floyd Day. And I uploaded a Metascript decode explaining the significance of Floyd and Kirk having the same birthday. I mean, birthdays, as we often note, are significant when it comes to world stage personages. But in this case, you have a martyr for the right, a martyr for the left that validates their worldview on the extreme ends. So on one side, this martyr validates systemic racism and oppression. On the other side, systemic subversion or control by Israel, basically, because that's where they're pointing their fingers when it comes to who killed Charlie Kirk, just like the conspiracy theorists have done with JFK, 9/11, and everything else. But this tweet, my response with the photos of the two, drawing attention to them, juxtaposing them, is my most popular tweet to date. And I think there's some significance here. And I'm not saying that I'm the cause of this, but it's being picked up. So it's been retweeted 375 times, 6,000 likes, 140,000 views in a couple of days. And what I'm getting mostly here are people on the Floyd side of the fence saying that they're going to basically try to hijack 1014 and they're going to celebrate Floyd as the right celebrates Kirk. That's next month. And in October, we also have another No Kings protest happening across the country. So that's still in the future. But now, on Sunday, there's going to be an event in Glendale, Arizona, where Trump, J.D. Vance, and Erica Kirk are going to be speaking, a memorial service for Charlie Kirk. And this is getting really interesting, and I have a video I'm doing tonight, another Metascript decode on Erica Kirk, and how we have already talked about The Tempest, and how the first episode has a Charlie Kirk-esque character, leader of the New Republicans, at a church, getting shot on the left side of his neck, gruesome, blood dripping out, just like what happened, but at the same time. And I've actually found some people online who've noticed this finally. But beyond that coincidental relationship between this very popular series and the real event, is if you continue the series, by episode 3, you find out that the widow is going to run instead of her dead husband. The significance here is that Erica Kirk has been named CEO of Turning Point USA, and now she's speaking with Trump and Vance at this event. She's been elevated. And interestingly, one of the subtexts, the intrigue in The Tempest, is that maybe the wife was behind the execution of her husband, the assassination, because she wanted that position. Well, I've seen, like Stu Peters, for example, I've seen a few people pointing at Erica Kirk as something of a diabolical character, possibly. Anyway, we'll get to that. Let me go ahead and open up comments. So tomorrow at 5 p.m., we're going to have a Zoom conference. So I haven't been able to take calls because of the lack of my desktop computer. I don't have the office set up right now. But tomorrow we're going to do a Zoom conference. So if you're in the Zoom conference, you can join simply by unmuting your mic. And it's going to be an open panel discussion on all things Charlie Kirk PSYOP, beginning from the off-world stage perspective, which is to say the perspective that we don't even know if he's dead. And if you do, or if you claim to, please fill us in. What evidence do you have that we're missing here, other than I saw it on TV? And we're going to analyze every aspect of this thing, especially a lot of the what I would call a state-approved conspiracies, because there are many of them. It's just like with JFK, and the JFK connections are another element we're going to look into as well. But what I mean here is, with JFK, he was shot from the book depository. He was shot from the grassy knoll. Jackie Kennedy shot him. The driver shot him. Like, what's the truth here? Well, you're never meant to get to it, because these rabbit trails are meant to keep you confined in their controlled media ecosystem. And this is no different. In fact, it's template. What's up, Marcel? What's up? Intelligent Counterspell. Here is your magic wrench. Speak up in the comments and I'll hand out a wrench. I also posted a link to Discord. What's up, Chris? Thanks for joining. Mel and Pip. Again, I posted a new link to the Discord server. We're kind of active there more than we have been in a long time. Thanks to these last couple of psyops. The subway stabbing and the Charlie Kirk psyop, these two events have really brought back, I think, a lot of our motivation to really dig in and continue to unravel this thing. Psyops are good for business. You know, I don't look at these things as indications that the world's falling apart. There's no, like, in my frame of mind here, I'm not worried about World War III or Civil War. And if they do a civil war, what's it going to look like? Curfews, staged events, out of sight, out of mind, fake until proven real. I'm not here crying wolf. I'm not chicken littling, which is what most truthers do because they're triggered. All right, Tunax has joined us. Reality Witness says, IPS think tank on top of the PSYOP. Well, you know, there are others who are picking up. And in fact, I've come across a couple of blogs that are new to me. I've been promoting. I will promote anyone who has the off-world stage perspective. And I found quite a few new channels that I'm going to share. One of them is called a couple of Substacks. And a couple of Twitter accounts as well have very much impressed me. Okay, here's one. It's Miri, M-I-R-I, .substack. Says, quote, whenever we have a PSYOP shooting, we always have, quote, the official story and the official conspiracy theory, with neither of these narratives representing the actual truth. People who instinctively question the mainstream narrative are funneled into the official conspiracy theory. The two camps argue furiously with each other, and the real truth remains obscured outside the Overton window. Its proponents are dismissed as vile ghouls and crazies. So this was a piece by Miri.substack. I mean, that's just a great way of putting it. Official story and official conspiracy theories. And right now we're seeing all the official conspiracy theories and who leads those things. I put up a meme of Candace Owens putting a red pill on a fishing hook, and it's labeled truther bait, because that's what their job is. Their job is to lead you around the world stage into the alternative boxes without ever you questioning the essential premise that did the person even die. They established it with their stories. Yeah, he's dead, and this is who did it, or this is the real shooter. But none of these ever get to the truth. Now, someone had remarked, and I'm just pointing this out because this used to be a standard talking point. Bridget says, in case you were wondering if we live in a simulation, yes, we do. And this is in response to the George Floyd, Charlie Kirk shared birthday. So for some people, these coincidences are so challenging, their entire concept of reality is destroyed. Like, now we live in a simulation because I can't figure this out. And I think that is the default kind of a reflexive take that a lot of people had for a long time, because they couldn't explain all of these coincidences, the ironic coincidences, the eerie coincidences. And so many of them pile up. You're like, well, it can't merely be coincidence. And this brought about the synchro mystics, who now started to interpret media coincidences, what we'd consider to be indicators of psyops. They would take that to mean that reality is essentially a video game. And so what I explained in my response was, no, it doesn't mean we're in a simulation. It means these high profile events are staged and simulated. So it's, you know, people go reach for the most extreme for some reason, but really it's the more mundane. that you should have to look at first. Otherwise, it becomes the appeal to authority. There's so much that has come up in the last few days. Here's one. South Park canceled another episode. They canceled an episode for Wednesday. And the thing is, South Park has been running nonstop since 1997, and they've never delayed an episode. They're known for their rapid turnaround. 330 episodes since 1997, and now one got delayed. And people are connecting this to the cancellation of Jimmy Kimmel, because this Charlie Kirk psyop has been used as a pretext to advance censorship on the right, canceling cancel culture on the right. So we have a picture. I've got a lot of stuff to go through tomorrow. We're going to go through all the videos and pictures when we're in Zoom. Now, this isn't a big deal to me, but I have to point this out because one of the things we have to do is notice who is still pushing mainstream or alternative mainstream talking points. You know, those who haven't had the paradigm shift because of their role in gatekeeping media fakery. So Owen Benjamin tweeted this the other day. He said, "I'm in some truther chats who are analyzing this event as possibly fake. So here's my opinion. I think this one happened pretty much as how they reported it." And so he goes on why he thinks it's 100% real. And then he ends it with, "This is why I'm completely for a digital online ID to use mainstream social media. It should be legal to use the internet without an ID, but not social media. It's too destructive and easy to rig." So I don't think that's merely a harmless opinion, because he's shilling for the internet equivalent of COVID-19 lockdowns, where now you have to wear, you have to mask your mind, vax your brain. No social media without digital ID is like saying you can't socialize without a mask on. And this is to protect us from mind viruses. That's the pretext, from this disease X that I've been talking about. So here you have someone who claims to be a banned comedian who is supporting the death of free speech over an obvious psyop. And that's the objective. That's why they're doing these psyops. That's why they release the video in such a graphic way. It's because they want to give the public a justification for censorship. They want them to demand it. And now you have the most banned comedian demanding censorship over a psyop. So that's kind of unforgivable. And I'm pointing it out because you'll find that all of the alternative thinkers are actually part of the bigger agenda. Okay, next. I do have quite a lot to go over tomorrow, a lot of visual stuff. Mark Ruffalo was talking on a podcast, and he was even saying that people have gone too far, and that that his friends were calling it fake, and that we need to tone it down. But I think it's interesting that Mark Ruffalo would be out there with that opinion, because he played a Trump-esque character in Mickey 17 who gets shot, if you recall. So I think it's notable to just kind of observe who portrays, in these roles, world stage characters, and how they also how they interface with the world stage when they're not in that character or in that role. We've talked about Robert De Niro in the same way, but it's interesting that Mark Ruffalo would be in this conversation, because again, he played the role of a character in Mickey 17 who not only gets shot and has blood on his cheek when he's posing for the cameras, but this was a movie that was released concurrent with the real shooting. Well, real in quotes. Okay, here's Morgan C00 says, "The first move people make around the incident is to lock in the claim that he's dead, or we know for sure he died. Once that is cemented, they shift to criticizing side details tied to it, treating those as the only things open for debate." So again, I'm taking note of any accounts who have figured out that there's a controlled dialectic with every single psyop. PB Sports Talk noticed something kind of unusual. Nick Cruz, Parkland shooter, went to McDonald's. Luigi Mangione, who killed the healthcare executive, went to McDonald's. The person who shot Charlie Kirk went to Dairy Queen. And there's a picture of him at Dairy Queen next to a poster of Superman. And I pointed out that Dylan Roof went to Burger King. They bought him a Whopper. The police actually took him there. I'm not sure what that means, but what is it with all these mass shooters getting fast food afterward? Intelligent Counterspell is gifted a membership, so that goes to CMG, which means you can get in free to tomorrow's Zoom conference. Andrea says, first Colbert, now Kimmel, last-minute settlements, secret side deals, multi-billion-dollar mergers pending Donald Trump's approval. Elizabeth Warren on X. Jamari May says, what are your thoughts on the 923 predictive programming from years past? It seems like this is the year when certain planetary alignments will coincide. I've been told since 2017 that the rapture starts on September 23rd. And back then, 2017, the person who told me this said, yeah, rapture begins September 23rd and 7 years of tribulation. And I'm like, well, then give me your car. Transfer your bank accounts to me because you're going to be in heaven. And for some reason, he declined. So when somebody says that the world's going to end on this date or I'm going to be raptured, if they're not willing to give you their material possessions, you don't have to take them seriously. Quay says, Tim, have you seen the new Mind Unveiled breakdown of government assassination and conspiracy movies? Right up your alley. No, I have not, but it's in my notes. Intelligent Counterspell says it could be a meetup place for the Manchurian Candidate. You know, okay, this is crazy. I have to get into this maybe today if I can find it, but certainly tomorrow. So the Manchurian Candidate, starring Frank Sinatra, and Suddenly were both movies, Sinatra films, that had to do with an assassination. And both of these are considered predictive concurrent programming for the JFK thing. But what gets stranger is that the director of Manchurian Candidate was hanging out with RFK when he got shot. And there's a lot of other stuff connected with that particular director where he's seemingly attached very directly to these assassinations. So we'll get into him. I think his name is Frankenheimer. I don't want to do the research on the fly, but it's part of my video later. But we'll get into that. Let's see what else. Oh, by the way, somebody bomb threaded RFK Jr. And we notice these patterns, right? Because someone will say, someone actually today had said to me, this concurrent programming example between The Tempest and real life doesn't prove anything. And like in and of itself, it doesn't. But it reminded me of how in Westworld, when the simulations, the synths, when they see something that contradicts their reality, like they see something modern like an iPhone, they don't perceive it. They say, that doesn't look like anything to me. And it's like this built-in defense mechanism against them waking up. And they live in a perpetual now, kind of like Groundhog Day. They repeat the same day again and again, and they're stuck in the cycle. The character who wakes up breaks the cycle. She starts to notice things, and she gathers a continuity day to day. And eventually she realizes that Westworld is a simulation, and then they escape. Well, I think that we are in a manufactured paradigm that essentially is a closed informational system. And when you show somebody something that suggests that there's a deeper underlying order, they'll say, that doesn't look like anything to me. That doesn't mean anything to me. And, you know, my response to that, and I'll read it verbatim here, just so you know where I'm coming from. Okay, he said, proves nothing. Proves nothing. Very good refutation to the video, just those two words. But I said, this happens with every staged event. real-time media psyop alignments, and this has been the case since the JFK assassination. You don't have enough of a knowledge base or empirical research on the topic to have a valid opinion. And what I mean is, if you think this is an anomalous alignment or coincidence, and you're not aware of decades of this systemic fakery and this entrainment between entertainment and news, then your perspective's too limited to really have a valid opinion. And that's not being dismissive, that's just being honest. It's like, you don't know about media fakery, you haven't observed it, you don't know how that distorts our collective timeline or consensus history. So your opinion on the matter is a little blinkered, insulated. Intelligent Counterspell says, but that tracks Westworld was a mind blower to me. Oh, Westworld is a Christopher Nolan, right? Was it Jonathan Nolan? The Nolans are major meta scripters. And Westworld in particular has copious concurrent programming. I mean, stuff that was released, like they released season 3 as the pandemic kicks off. All kinds of 311 stuff, symbolism, it's all there. It's a consistent pattern, but this is with all of their movies. So one of our areas of research is the directors. You know, we're not focused on crisis actors at shootings. It's a very limited hangout operation type of thing anyway. We're looking at who writes these things, who's involved in the propaganda that reinforces the psyops. And you find these directors, you know, people know Kubrick, but he's one of many directors that we can point to who are producing content to reinforce incoming psyops. And it's a reoccurring pattern. Lieutenant Weinberg says, Tim, I was wondering about the mic on Kirk's shirt. Is there a reason for a backup mic? Yeah, the handheld mic is going to be geared towards the audience in the auditorium. And the other one is likely for the live streaming. So that would explain that. But what we're looking at here is, so when we first saw that, we were like, there's a dot on his shirt, it moves. And the way it moves, it looks like some kind of CGI overlay. But we were able to eventually ascertain that that was actually a mic. Another thing, his ring jumps from his ring finger to his pinky. But other videos subsequently have suggested that there's a reason to explain that. It has to do with his, I don't know. It has to do with his fidgeting with the ring, but it's not some kind of CGI artifact. Yeah, exactly. Season 3 had the 2020 riots concurrent with the season. And then we're talking about Fallout today. Fallout, of course, follows the nuke. And Christopher Nolan did Oppenheimer, which is the nuke. So you got the bomb and the fallout. But both Fallout and Westworld contain concurrent programming. In fact, I was watching Fallout, and that's where I noticed, and this is before Butler, there was a scene where Vault 33 was taken over by another group. They stole the election, and they massacred a group, and they cleaned it up, with the exception of one drop of blood, which was on the right side of the head of a foosball character that happened to look like Donald Trump. So I paused on that frame, and I thought, that's interesting. You got a spot of blood on the right side of a figurine that looks like Trump in this context, which pointed at some kind of a coup or an attempt. But anyway, this was back in April. So this is before the July 13th shooting. But that was just one example of where you have this predictive programming content for something that's going to arrive. But what's more important to me is the concurrent programming, the real-time stuff, because you can't just dismiss that as cherry picking. But they're all part of the same, what I call psyop reinforcement content. It's propaganda. Yeah, Intelligent Counterspell. The season finale of Boys, they actually changed the title, Assassination Run, Season 4, Episode 8. And the Homelander, who, if you haven't seen The Boys, It's about these superheroes, and the Homelander is based on Donald Trump. And the last few episodes of season 4, which aired concurrent with the shooting, were all about this planned assassination thing. And if you look at the imagery, it has the Trump character smiling with blood all over his face. Sort of like Trump, you know, posing for the cameras with blood. But we have many examples of movies, even cartoons. There was a Batman Caped Crusader that was airing at the same time. And in that one, there was this character called Rupert Thorne, and a bladed Batman boomerang was thrown and it cut his right ear. Yeah, Anx G, I'm sorry about that. I understand the layout and stuff. I'm going to try to improve that once I'm in a studio. This is the best we can afford at the moment, but I'll work on that. And we're going to be in a Zoom conference tomorrow, so if you want to be able to call in or chat, you certainly can. I mean, I definitely am working on getting back into some kind of a routine and a schedule, but it's just not possible right now. The movie Civil War, definitely. So the movie Civil War had a Trump character. The president was basically Trump, who gets killed in the White House. All these movies, it's not just that they're imitating. It's not art imitates life. It's not that they're drawing inspiration. In fact, there was this article that came up regarding Tempest, and it was explaining, based on the production times and the release dates, there was no way you could say that they were imitating what they were about, what we were seeing in real life. But it was eerily prescient. You know, I say that we live on planet Netflix quite often. Okay, now, Candace Owens claims that, and we talked about this before, after the shooting, you see somebody go up behind and they clean up the set, and they grab some kind of SD disc from a camera. And we've been looking at this as, okay, that's kind of strange. Where are the police? Why are they allowing these individuals to tamper with the crime scene? Well, Candace Owens used to work for Turning Point USA, even though they're trying to bury that. And she knows that person. She got in touch with them. And even though they claimed, a lot of people do damage control for the mainstream. They're like, well, the reason you conspiracy theorists are confused is that they had to give this to the FBI. Well, how do you know? You know, how are you inventing excuses for their glitches? So what happened is they supposedly gave whatever was on that camera to the FBI, but then Candace Owens says, no, she knows that person, got in touch with them, and in a Zoom conference, he showed her the video. So that contradicts that. But what Candace Owens said today is that there was no blood. She's talking about the camera that was behind Charlie Kirk. No blood, no gore. Her words. Now, what does that mean? Not sure yet. I don't believe it would make any sense for Owens to say it was fake, because there is a photo where you can see some blood. Stage blood, theatrical blood, but regardless, if her perspective isn't that Charlie's still alive, then her perspective is still controlled opposition. It's still going to lean towards somebody did it other than the shooter that was reported, a patsy. And this patsy narrative is standard. It's template. So one of the hoax indicators, like, I don't think you shouldn't have to rely solely on the visuals. You know, people think, well, if you can't prove to me it's a hoax based on what I see on the TV screen, then it's real. That's like saying, if you can't tell me how that magic trick is performed, we must agree it's magic. No, it doesn't work that way. I need more research to know how the trick functions. So in this case, just because I can't look at the screen and say, this is how he faked the shooting of the neck, doesn't mean it's real. That's not the default. You need more information. You need to expand your frame of reference. So when it comes to this particular event, if it matches a template, like, you know, false rabbit trails, the standard patsy story, the usual scapegoat, well, real life doesn't follow predictable templates. So that's another hoax indicator. I have this concept of the blindfolded auto hoaxer I've been working on, because you should be able to determine whether something is likely staged or not based on the information without needing to solely rely on the visuals. And we have to kind of go in that direction anyway, because it's so easy now, generative AI, which is improving rapidly, to completely fake anything. I mean, I fell for a whale-sized clownfish. Dajor Vision says, who cleaned up the crime scene? Exactly. Who cleaned up the crime scene? That's a big question. I have a lot of questions about the event, but that was one. So the guy who was taking the camera down was standing on the chair that Kirk was sitting on. So from what I understand, when it comes to crime scene investigation, they want to photograph everything as it was when it happened. The more they mess with it, the more they possibly exonerate the shooter. Angshi says, David Copperfield made the Statue of Liberty disappear live on air. Yeah, exactly. If your sole frame of reference is, I saw it on TV, well, then what are you? You're like somebody who believes that the magic shows are real magic. You're falling for the illusions. Copaesthetic says, if she says no blood, she's setting up as a different caliber playing into the second shooter psyop. Exactly. And something else too, by saying no blood, and then she's going to be instantly discredited, it helps muddy the waters and really distort how the public or mainstreamers will see people who question the media. Like, I think Candace Owens' job is to essentially muddy the waters and make normal people hate conspiracy theorists. I think that's part of her gig. So she's not going to come out tomorrow or the next day and say Charlie Kirk is alive. And if your starting point isn't questioning whether he actually died, then your starting point is assuming that the mainstream perspective is the starting point, and then you got to branch out from there into conspiracies. And that's exactly what they want you to do. All of the conspiracy theories that they approve of begin in the mainstream box and end up in the subset we call Trutherville. None of them will lead you to subtract from the basic scene that's been set up. So they're going to take for granted that Charlie Kirk is dead. So whatever she has to say tomorrow, it's irrelevant. You have to remember too that, and I'm not singling her out, but she is very pronounced in this particular event. She's not seeking the truth. She's not researching. She's not trying to find out what happened. She's a propagandist. And you can say this about any of these influencers. You think that they're actually trying to find out anything? No, she's leading her subscribers to a conclusion that she already had in mind, which is Israel is the scapegoat for everything. That's kind of her gig. It has been for some time. That's why they had her leave Daily Mail, to make her have some street cred. But one other point too is that this whole J-pill narrative is the main core of woke right. Just like woke left, their central premise is systemic racism. So this reflexive blaming Netanyahu for everything that she engages in is actually strategic. It has nothing to do with she's finding this out. Yeah, I saw that. I believe that Macron's wife is going to submit medical evidence to contradict Candace Owens' transvestigation claims. Really insane. Now, I wasn't sure when it first happened how it could have been faked. And I was like, wow, that looks real. But I don't just reflexively say it's fake. I have to think about these things. And we were looking at squibs. Copaesthetic says research squibs is, yeah. So there are squibs that involve tubes that go underneath prosthetic patches of skin that are 100% concealable. And this event does have a lot of squibbiness about it. But instead of thinking about squibs, they have people looking at, well, who's the real shooter? Is it this person here in the window? Is it this guy over here who looks like he has a gun under his arm? Is it this guy here whose iPhone is really a gun? Or is it somebody in a trap door shooting up? Or is the gun in the camera in front of him? is the gun in the camera behind him. I mean, seriously, I think I've counted 7 different possible shooters in this thing. And my point is, those are planted. They probably had 7 of their PSYOP actors providing plausible conspiracies or explanations, like, or suspects. So like, maybe it was this guy. It adds up. So they have these people chasing all these different examples of what you would call truth or bait or chicken feed, breadcrumbs. Rebel Black says, my prediction is Candace will go through full auto hoaxer and will get canceled. No, she won't. It's not even possible. It's not even possible that she would go so far the day before Charlie Kirk's big memorial to say he's still alive. Single Event Upset says, this man is an idiot. Well, you're a true believer in the mainstream. You know, it's essentially the faith that you have in the mainstream that has you locked into their box, where you can't even conceive that they would lie to you on this scale. Dan says, well, you're really lost. Well, what do you mean by lost? I mean, what is your evidence that we don't have? One of my points I've been making lately is that if there are any indicators of hoaxery, if it fits a template, if there are planted narratives, just the fact that they're planting red herrings means it's a staged event. So that alone means your assumption has to be 0 deaths. Your assumption has to be fake until proven real. And we've barely dug in. Tomorrow, we're going to go into detail. We're going to go through all of the available indicators of hoaxery, stagery, fakery, start to finish. Dan says, I normally dox people like you, but I think you need a wellness check. I'll send someone by. See, my question to you would be, what makes you so defensive about mainstream media that you want to dox somebody who goes against it? It's very culty. And I do say that mainstream media is tantamount to a religion at this point. Tom Danks says there's no proof it was a staged event. Well, what do you know? I mean, you don't have the same perspective we do if you're not automatically skeptical. You think they're going to tell you? See, Single Event says you need some antipsychotics. So for you, and this is not something that a psychologist would say, no psychiatrist would agree with you. If you think that mental health is synonymous with believing the news, then I think you're a little bit insulated. You're in a Truman Show. But this is something else too. We have different perspectives. And I know that if you're in the box, you're not going to be tolerant of people who aren't in your box. I mean, look how the left hates the right. But the truthers, Trutherville, are in a subset of the mainstream. And all of the conspiracy theories out there are planted for those who don't buy into the mainstream, but they're just as manufactured. Don't beef with the bots. Well, I don't think it's worth our time to debate with people who don't have enough information. Like, what do you have to add? If you don't know what concurrent programming is, if you don't know what predictive programming is, if you don't have a concept of metascript or what long-term media fakery does to our consensus worldview, if you haven't thought about these things, then nothing we say is going to make sense to you. And I'm perfectly fine with that. Like, I'm certainly not trying to tell people what to think, but you're not going to shame us into abandoning skepticism. So there's a couple of different ways people consume media, active and passive. If you're accepting what you see at face value, you're actually a passive consumer, meaning you're not using critical thinking. If you're not fully apprised of media fakery, you're uninformed, but you're not critically thinking. What does that mean? Well, it means that you don't have a mental immune system for mind viruses, for propaganda. You're what we would call a MAIDS patient, mind AIDS. No mental immune system to protect you against mind viruses, compulsory belief. But skepticism is non-existent for media consumers. And that's actually true for the conspiracy theorists as well. And, you know, if you think this is crazy, you'd have to listen for a little while longer. You might be shocked to see how many things that you believe that you take for granted that we're actually non-believers in. And it's not that we're just rejecting reflexively, but quite often, no, skepticism is not speculating wildly. It's about dismissing what you can't verify. So what can you actually verify about what happened in Utah? You weren't there. You're wholly dependent on what you've been spoon-fed. That's not skepticism. Skepticism is suspension of disbelief, and I mean suspension of belief. And in this case, I don't believe it. I am suspending it until I have more evidence. So what evidence do you have that can lead me to conclude what you've concluded? Because I don't have the faith that you do in what is on the screen. And no, skepticism on the world stage is selective. So the left wing, the mainstream, they're skeptical against the conspiracy theorists, but not against their own side. Conspiracy theorists automatically reject mainstream, but they're not skeptical of their own red pill stuff. So you can't really say that they're truly skeptical. If you're not skeptical of the mainstream version at face value, then you have no business claiming skepticism. If you're not rejecting belief until you have enough information, if you're not slightly agnostic about some of these things, you're not a skeptic. You're a passive receptacle for government propaganda, mainstream or alternative. But no, you will find, though, that true believers will try to shame you into compliance. And I'm like, well, who's paying you to do that? If you don't work for the mainstream media, if you're not part of it, what is your incentive to try to get people to believe what you believe? It's really bizarre. And another point, too, I'm not a believer in a lot of this stuff. I consider myself an informed disbeliever. Like, the reason I don't believe is because I know more about it than you do. And the additional information has led me away from it. And so that's why I'm asking, like, what gives you faith that what you know is true? How do you know? Prove to me you're a skeptic, that you suspended judgment till you had available information, because nobody had it day one. If you believe a story because it's published, if you believe a headline, you're not a skeptic. I generally wait 3 days or so before I form any kind of opinion about something. Tom Dank says the mainstream media has basically no power unless you're over 60. Yeah, a lot of it's conditioning. And they started this back with JFK. If you don't believe the official story, you're a conspiracy theorist. Well, that's a pejorative, because the burden of proof, and this is why these individuals who are mad about this, they don't get this. The burden of proof is not yours. The burden of proof for any of these events is on the mainstream media. And if they can't provide it, that's their fault. They suck. It's not your fault. If they can't provide it and it's their job, you're under no obligation to say, well, I'm just going to believe it. No, you can suspend judgment. I don't believe that girl was killed on the subway. What do you think about that? I don't believe George Floyd was killed by Derek Chauvin. Go down the list of school shootings. The Annunciation school shooting, we have plenty of reasons to think that was fake. That's a recent one. In fact, any number of these mass shootings you can bring up, we have plenty to suggest that these things aren't real. And if you balk at that, I'm like, well, why? Because the reason why we arrive at this is we've studied it, we've looked at it. We're basing this on empirical research. And if you don't know about how enhanced your worldview is by psyops, then you're ignorant. And that's by design. You've been hoodwinked. Tom Dank says, I think the average person is skeptical of official stories. I mean, not a single person I know actually fell for the Epstein story. Well, that's true. The issue here, though, is that when people don't fall for the mainstream, there's a bunch of loudmouths in alternative media that they go over to. They gravitate towards these loudmouths, these big voices. They don't adopt a skeptical methodology. They just go from being mainstream believers to alternative believers. And believers is the key word, because by believer, I mean a passive propaganda receptacle who is not critically examining what they're taking in. They're not employing a skeptical methodology. Rebel Black says, Tim, they insult and threaten people over opinions. Same attitude of the far right, far left. Yeah, I'm worried that Dan is going to shoot me in the neck. He's like, how dare you not believe CNN? He's going to cap me over it. Do I have to worry about Dan? He said he's going to dox me, which means give away my address and my name and stuff, presumably so somebody can come shoot me in the throat. Is that what Dan wants to do? It's pathetic, honestly, that you have so little control over your emotions that somebody having a different opinion makes you want to burn them at the stake. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, you're a cultist. And this is something else, too. I consider myself a conscientious objector to the Psy War. And if you don't know there's psychological warfare going on, you're numbed to it. You're a casualty. But I'm not participating in it. I don't care what your opinions are. It doesn't make me want to shoot you in the neck. But this Dan character wants to shoot you in the neck if you don't believe the news. Like, what the hell? Like, seriously, there's something wrong with that. People need to really think about the notion here of what it means to have free speech and discourse, civility. Like, since when do we just go immediately to, this person doesn't believe, let me attack them? Or let me be a passive-aggressive loser bitch and dox them? Like, if you have my docs, just come to my house, Dan. Insane. But we've encountered this for a long time. It's not new to us. And I have no problem with people disagreeing. And it's because I'm willing to debate these things. That's why we're having these discussions. In fact, Dan is invited tomorrow to the Zoom conference where we're going to discuss all of the reasons why we're saying this stuff is fake. We have reasons to think it's fake. Do you have reasons to believe it? Like, what are those? Appeals to authority? I believe the screen. Sorry, that's not good enough. It looks real. That's not good enough. And your naivety is really showing if you're not aware of the extent of media fakery, malfeasance, psychological operations, and how all of the people on both sides are sellouts. They're all actors, essentially. They're not autonomous. Rebel Black says bots and glowies are gang stalking. Well, how do they find us? But I think we need that. Like, we need to have those who don't have a clue, those who are stuck in Trutherville, we need to have them confront this so we can examine what their perspective leads them to and why we have these disagreements. I think we need to examine it and find out, like, well, here's why we believe what we believe. Here's why we think this. Like, it really is more philosophical than political. That's why we're not charged up about this stuff. We're not political. So here's a tweet from Rebel Black. He said, how can these incidents have so many theories, conspiracies, and counter-conspiracies? It's enough to make someone's head explode. Because people are finding so many possible culprits here. And Maddie V said, it's chicken feed. It's how they keep the animals busy on the farm. And so that's one of the big points we're going to make tomorrow, is that there are many conspiracy theories that have been planted here in this Charlie Kirk psyop intentionally. Like, it's pretty obvious. And if this was a real event, you wouldn't have all these planted narratives to lead people around in circles. It doesn't work that way. Reality doesn't follow these types of templates that make things so super predictable. Now, I saw a picture of Charlie Kirk in a hospital bed, but I'm pretty sure it's AI because the font on his shirt is much bigger. So you can't believe anything at face value. I get pictures, I get video clips, I will look at them, I'll consider them, but you have to wait. You have to think about it for a minute. Another hoax indicator. After the event, there are immediate examples of political utility. They immediately have agendas that get implemented. I mean, look, they've already used this Charlie Kirk thing to axe Jimmy Kimmel, pushing for censorship, getting the right to agree with it. Okay, here it is. John Frankenheimer, Hollywood director, had direct ties to JFK. The film 7 Days in May from 1963 was facilitated by Kennedy, who allowed it to be filmed at the White House. The movie depicts a military coup against the sitting president, a plot eerily close to the themes surrounding Cold War, paranoia, shadow governments, and political assassination. He did The Manchurian Candidate, 1962, about a brainwashed assassin, a patsy situation, program killers. RFK Connection, June 4th, 1968, right before Robert Kennedy was assassinated, Frankenheimer spent the day with him. It's documented that Frankenheimer drove RFK to the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, where he gave his speech after the primary and was shot in the kitchen. So you have this overlap of a director who directed The Manchurian Candidate, which overlapped with the JFK assassination, and then he's there at RFK's assassination. And that's just scratching the surface. But we're pointing out how there's this overlap between film directors and psyops. There's consistent overlap that I'll go into detail about tomorrow between entertainment media and psyops. This is entrainment between entertainment and news, and it goes back back to the JFK assassination and all the way up. Yeah, I saw that Candace Owens called herself a Mason. Look, I think Candace Owens is a very key figure in this and has been since White Lives Matter with Ye. And these PSYOP operatives, again, they're not journalists seeking to find the truth and expose it or reveal anything. They're propagandists. And their job is to lead their alternative pen where they can be contained. And they never start with the premise that maybe the news is lying about the story. It's always just our version or their version of the same event, assuming the event is real. I saw that Jamarian May, the PNC Bank commercial with the widow whose husband faked his death and they had the 2 kids. I saw that one. And it was 2 days before the CK incident. That was insane. Actually, no, it's perfectly explainable. We know The Tempest on Hulu. It is perfectly tracking with this entire thing, including Erica Kirk's role. By the way, Erica Kirk had a video back when she was Miss Arizona, and in it, it shows her playing basketball. And it's interesting because it's a short clip that just came out, and she's got the number 11 on her jersey, and the girl next to her, the woman next to her, has 22. So this 11/22 JFK thing, the JFK death date, and there's a ton of JFK stuff attached to Charlie Kirk that we've just been noting. Like Roger Stone said, a few days before the event, Charlie Kirk invited him on to talk about the JFK assassination. Like we have a number of overlaps between these various psyops, which are intentional. Like it's not a coincidence that George Floyd and Charlie Kirk are juxtaposed and put together for this upcoming 10/14 Charlie Kirk Remembrance Day. These are mirrors. Again, what does Floyd represent? He represents a vindication of critical race theory, left-wing wokeism, and systemic racism oppressing the poor, that the West is the oppressor based on race and whiteness. And that is the central tenet of woke left. Woke right, and their main scapegoat is Jewish world domination. And who are all the conspiracy theorists blaming for the death of Charlie Kirk? All of them. It's lockstep. Israel. And this was predictable. We predicted this. It fits a pattern every single time. In fact, I have an axiom on this in the Auto Hoaxer 101 that basically says that if the PSYOP is perfectly bifurcated left and right with these predictable template responses, it's pretty much fake. We are noticing these patterns, and they're so consistent that they are, in fact, highly predictable. HG says we're living in different realities. Well, it's about points of view and what your starting premise is for any of these events. So a good example I've been finding lately is to explain this concept is ask some AI chat model, ask ChatGPT anything at all. And its perspective is going to be the mainstream. Ask it about history, about some recent event. But its perspective is going to be the mainstream version is valid. It's assumed to be true. It doesn't account for propaganda, media fakery, psyops, or the cumulative effect of decades of psyops on our consensus worldview. So ChatGPT's perspective, therefore, its point of view, is what I'd consider MSM, mainstream mediation. So the truther's point of view is that, no, it's actually not that. It's the second shooter, or it's this other group, or the government's behind weather modification. It's not climate change. So their perspective is not the same as ChatGPT. So you have these two different perspectives on the same events. Why do left-wingers believe in climate change and right-wingers believe in geoengineering and weather weapons, etc.? Well, it's their starting points. So we do live in different overlapping universes. We coexist in these various subjective belief systems. But our perspective is neither mainstream nor alternative. This think tank has a perspective that is inclusive of the world stage as a model, as a map, and the map is not the territory, and even having that distinction between the world stage and off-world stage is something that you're not going to find anywhere else, because everyone is operating from the world stage. Like ChatGPT, it's on the world stage. John says, Jewish world domination, damn, I wonder if this is real, a total bunk. The Mossad does have the best foreign intelligence. No, here's the thing, is the right-wing media ecosystem on the fringe, but it's pretty much centered around the idea that there is a central scapegoat that dominates the world. And for them, it's Israel. But for the left, it's whiteness. These are scapegoat narratives that are there, that suggest that they have an oppressor. So they're both under the presumption that they're being oppressed. So far right is oppressed by Israel, far left is oppressed by whiteness, racism. And I'm saying that these are both narrative frameworks that put them into these highly polarized positions where they're always facing each other. I mean, it is a brilliant system. It's a sheep pen. No one escapes. And all of the conspiracy channels out there, which call themselves truthers, and they talk about truth quite a bit, they actually take people deeper into the deception. To use the Matrix analogy, most people are taking the blue pill, the dream world. The red pill, they think of it as an awakening, but really it just puts you into a nightmare. It's just harder propaganda. And so a nightmare is not an awakening. It's actually, you're still in the dream, but now you're having a bad time. Now you're scared of 5G towers and immigrants and aliens and any number of things that can make you afraid of. All right, well, again, tomorrow, 5 p.m., we're going to have a 3-hour open panel discussion about the Charlie Kirk PSYOP. And again, Dan, instead of shooting me in the neck, you should join us and bring whatever evidence you have that can sway us. Use evidence, use reason, use logic. You don't need to bring out your bullets with or threats of doxing people. Like, what the hell is that? Rebel Black says, I love the fictional football team named Atlanta Masons from that movie Him. Yeah, I want to see that, actually. I want to see him. And, well, I got to finish this Hulu Tempest. So if you don't know, look this up. Tempest on Hulu, released. And it's on my channel, infiniteplane.live. Released on September 10th. The opening scene has a Charlie Kirk-esque character in a church, leader of the New Republicans, getting shot in the neck. And it aired at the same time that Kirk was shot. So that's a coincidence, you could say. But we predicted it. We said, if this thing is a hoax, there's going to be relevant concurrent programming to reinforce the PSYOP. I mean, they really know how to paint the zeitgeist. Everybody in the world that day is seeing the same thing, whether it's fiction or on the news. They put it in all the top movies. This is a consistent pattern. That's why I'm saying that people who aren't like, yeah, Dan might not be aware of this, but this is not cherry picking. This is not anomalous. This is actually systemic fakery. But then you go deeper. Episode 2, episode 3, it's about the widow taking over. And after Kirk dies, his widow comes out, calls herself a widow. Everyone calls her a widow. The widow's taking over TPUSA. Well, in Hulu, the widow takes over the New Republican Party. And the speculation about her role in her husband's death mirrors what we see with Charlie Kirk, with some of the people on the right who are suggesting that TPUSA was taken over by Israel operatives or agents. I mean, it's so perfectly tracking with this TV show, not just the shooting, that it should have people thinking. But unfortunately, most people who see these things dismiss it as coincidence or attribute it to we're in a simulation. It's like, no, it's not either of those. It's the fact that entertainment and the fake events are delivering the same messaging at the same time. And this has been happening since the inception of media. Like we're talking about Frankenheimer and the JFK and RFK connections. All right, let's see if I have anything else in my notes here. Again, I have a lot of stuff, video and visual stuff, that we're going to discuss tomorrow. And Sunday, there's going to be the memorial where Kirk and Trump and Vance will be. It's going to be at, I think, 12 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time. And it's going to be protested. So I'm expecting it to be interesting. So we'll continue this tomorrow. I'm taking note of anybody on Twitter who's aware of this control dialectic, this false binary that attends every one of these fake events. I'm glad to see more people seeing this, because I think what we need is a paradigm shift in alternative media where people start to realize that we have been consistently misled. And what are we being misled from? And that's what we're pointing out here. Yeah, John points out, being in a simulation is not provable. We'd have to understand the universe deeper before science has a thing to say about simulation theory. Well, simulation theory is not a theory. If anything, it's a metaphysical model. Simulation is just another way of saying God. And it's endorsed by Elon Musk, by Joe Rogan, and Neil deGrasse Tyson. And it's fed out there for a reason. And I'm highly critical of it, because they've used simulation theory as this catch-all explanation for anything that looks fake on the news. So their thinking is, if this is fake on the news, then reality's fake. And no, that's cognitive sabotage. It's meant to distract you from the fact that we're in a completely controlled paradigm, and that entertainment media is controlled by government for the purposes of brainwashing. And this is a consistent pattern. I know it's entertaining, but entertainment is a side effect of the propaganda. It's meant to be, it's there to condition you. All right, well, my battery's about to die. We'll continue this talk later. Go to infiniteplainsociety.com to get into tomorrow's discussion. And I'm not here to gatekeep or to block people just because they don't agree. I would just ask that we can actually discuss it on the merits of our arguments instead of bringing out threats to dox people or shoot them in the neck. And so Dan wants to shoot me in the neck so I don't talk. And I'm like, Dan, let's chat about this like reasonable human beings first. Because we're not political here. I'm not political whatsoever. I'm an alien anthropologist, if anything. What we're doing is more philosophical. This is about psychoepistemology. It's about how you process information. And it's about transitioning from a passive media consumer, a propaganda receptacle, into a critically thinking skeptic with a broader understanding of the cumulative effect of decades of media fakery on our consensus worldview and where that consensus worldview comes from. Because it does have a centralized source. Tomorrow, 5 p.m. Mountain Time, go to the Ko-Fi link if you want to get in. or you can just join Patreon or either of the blogs there. You don't want to miss it. If you do miss it, it's fine. I will have it replayed later. But if you're there, you can get in on the voice chat. All right.